Good morning. It's April 24th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the Yoon-Biden summit scheduled for this week. President Yoon is bound for Washington, D.C. for a sit-down with his American counterpart Joe Biden. North Korean nuclear issues and talks on the supply chain will be among the top agenda items at Wednesday's summit. South Korea has returned Japan to its whitelist for fast-track trade status after 3 years and 7 months. Tokyo is yet to do the same for Seoul. And countries around the world rush to Sudan to evacuate their diplomatic staff and citizens from the war-torn country. But ongoing battles, despite a ceasefire, are making rescue projects more challenging. President Yoon sets off for Washington, D.C. today for an official state visit, the first made by a South Korean leader in 12 years. Now, before Yoon's sit-down with President Joe Biden on Wednesday, our Oh Soo-young gives us a preview of what to expect.
The first official U.S. state visit in 12 years for a South Korean leader. The highlight of Yoon's trip will undoubtedly be his summit on Wednesday with U.S. President Joe Biden. The commanders-in-chief are expected to first and foremost address security challenges, namely North Korea's growing nuclear weapons capabilities.
The U.S. deterrence hasn't kept up with the advancements made by North Korea on the nuclear front. So I think the South Korean government would like the United States to put forward more complex and sophisticated response measures that are more visible to the South Korean public in order to reassure the country against the growing North Korea's nuclear threat.
President Yoon himself has been pushing for Seoul to have greater involvement in the joint planning and execution of Washington's nuclear weapons operations upon a nuclear attack by Pyongyang. He's called for measures stronger than NATO's nuclear sharing arrangement with the US, under which Washington deploys tactical nuclear weapons in Germany and Italy and operates them after consultation. Another major aspect of Yoon's trip will be economic security, with 7 major business-related events. Yoon's top priority on that front will be gaining some leeway for South Korean auto and tech firms adversely affected by America's industrial policies, chiefly the Inflation Reduction Act and the Chips and Science Act. Dubbing himself the country's #1 salesman, Yoon is taking some 122 business people, including the chiefs of Samsung, SK, LG, Lotte and Hyundai, to expand partnerships and investments, particularly in high-tech areas, including the digital sector, biopharmaceuticals, and even media contents. Beyond commercial ties, the South Korean president will aim to forge partnerships in research and development in cutting-edge areas.
As the US is an advanced science and tech powerhouse with core technologies, strengthening cooperation with South Korea, which has strengths in manufacturing, is expected to see great synergy. During this state visit, we will strengthen cooperation in fields such as advanced semiconductors, biotech, space, and quantum AI.
During his week-long stay in Washington, D.C. and Boston, Yoon will focus on aiming to transform the traditional security alliance upon its 70th anniversary to a global strategic comprehensive partnership, with tangible outcomes outlined in a joint statement by the two leaders following their summit talks on Wednesday. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon has been in the office for less than a year, but his trip to the U.S. will already be his 6th time meeting U.S. President Joe Biden. So what's been discussed in his past meetings with U.S. counterparts? Our Kim Do-yeon looks into key topics.
Less than a year since he took office, President Yoon has met U.S. President Joe Biden on at least 5 occasions. The first was a summit in May as Biden came to Seoul just 10 days after Yoon's inauguration amid a wide range of bilateral issues. The first was supply chain cooperation, which Biden emphasized as he went straight to a Samsung semiconductor plant in Pyeongtaek, and the two presidents met for the first time.
Our two nations work together to make the best, most advanced technology in the world. And this factory is proof of that. And that gives both the Republic of Korea and the United States a competitive edge in the global economy, if we can keep our supply chains resilient, reliable, and secure.
And for South Korea, it was a turning point in the ROK-US alliance, as the joint statement following the summit clearly showed the two countries would focus even more on economic cooperation beyond traditional security issues. But that wasn't to say security was neglected amid North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threat. The two reaffirmed Washington's extended deterrence commitment to Seoul, which entails a full range of U.S. defense capabilities, including nuclear, conventional, and missile defense. They agreed to reactivate their high-level extended deterrence talks, after which the two sides have bolstered joint military drills and exchanges. Yoon and Biden's second meeting came 1 month later during Yoon's trip to the NATO summit in Madrid. Joined by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the three discussed North Korea's increasing missile provocations and agreed to strengthen joint defense measures. Yoon and Biden also had a chance to meet on the sidelines of Phnom Penh ASEAN Summit. Their third meeting in November came after South Korea voiced concerns over the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which put Korean automakers at a disadvantage in the American market. That said, Yoon relayed his concerns to Biden during their almost hour-long meeting. Other brief tete-a-tetes took place in London during Queen Elizabeth II's funeral and the UN General Assembly. As the two are now very well acquainted, Seoul's top office says Yoon's state visit to D.C. will be able to expand the strategic bilateral partnership even further. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The United States' security commitment to South Korea has long been one of the top agenda items between the two allies. But how much of a stretch to that commitment can we expect from the Yoon-Biden summit this week? For more, we're joined by Lieutenant General retired Chun In-bum. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Good morning. First off, South Korean President Yoon in an interview last week raised the need for stronger countermeasures against North Korea, as well as nuclear threats that are as powerful as NATO's. What does that mean?
So although our deterrence has been working against the North Koreans so far, as everybody knows, North Korea has been improving their nuclear capability, including a lot of missile launches, and they're getting better. So it's time that we look at where we are, putting all options on the table, and to see if it's enough. So I think a comprehensive discussion will be following these summit meetings.
Right, and there are also speculations and hopes that a Korean version of NATO's so-called nuclear sharing deal is expected to be on the summit agenda. Now, what details will be included there? I mean, what would such a nuclear sharing agreement look like?
So I think the more accurate phrase would be that the United States and Korea will be looking at the extended deterrence posture between the two countries. Mm-hmm. So within that framework, nuclear sharing will be included. Nuclear sharing refers to the NATO type, which is, number one, a U.S. nuclear weapon system being delivered by NATO countries. Number two, in order to do that, NATO member countries, about 5 of them, participate in what is called a nuclear planning group. In the NPG, they plan and practice for this delivery. Now, this NPG is, in my view, more important because that's where they share concepts and limitations and restrictions, which furthers understanding. This is what we need. We need to know what the consequences, what the restrictions are, and all the things that will come. So when nuclear sharing does occur, or when it should occur, the NPG part, which is now the extended deterrence working group that we have on the South Korean-United States relationship, that is probably what is more important. So what I'm looking at now is a more detailed and constructed extended deterrence working group on the Korean Peninsula.
Sure. And also in line with that question, quoting a high-ranking American official, Reuters reported over the weekend that the Biden administration will pledge, quote, substantial steps to underscore the U.S. commitment to deterring a North Korean nuclear attack on South Korea. Now, what could those substantial steps be?
So here's the problem. If North Korea was ever to succeed in having the ability to strike the United States, it'll take them about 40 minutes from launch to impact. In that time, I would speculate that North Korea would already be seeing a United States reaction. In other words, even before the North Korean missile hit a U.S. city, North Korea, Pyongyang would probably be bombed. On the Korean Peninsula, we have 3 minutes. So there's no time for even to think about what are the responses will be. So this is a big difference between where you're sitting, whether you're sitting in Washington or Seoul. So what might be substantial in the eyes of the Americans might not be substantial in the eyes of the Koreans. So this is the gap that the two nations must understand and try to narrow as much as possible.
Right, and a lot of experts, including you, say U.S. extended deterrence should come out as more than just a commitment signed and sealed on the paper, like you said, more constructive. Then how much of practical extended deterrence should Washington provide to Seoul this time?
Well, actually, I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm seeing right now. Number one, what I'm seeing is a strong wording, simple but very strong, which is end of the regime. I hope North Korea knows what this means. And so if North Korea uses nuclear weapons, it'll be the end of the regime. The United States, unfortunately, has not been using this phrase, and I really feel comfortable with that. Secondly, every time North Korea fires off a missile, the United States has shown their resolve and capability by sending B-1s and B-2s. So now we've had so many of them, we feel, that's another practice run. But again, it shows the will of the United States and the capability of the alliance to conduct these kind of counteroffensive actions. So right now we're pretty good. But still, there are things that we need to talk about. And the real important thing is, does North Korea believe that the United States is cruel enough to kill women and children?
I see. All right, we'll keep an close eye on the summit, especially on that so-called nuclear sharing and also the extended version of extended deterrence from Washington to Seoul. All right, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning.
Thank you.
South Korea puts Japan back on its list of favored trading nations as of today. Seoul's Trade Ministry said on Friday that Japan's status will be restored on South Korea's whitelist of strategic goods export destinations, granting it trade benefits along with 28 other nations like the U.S. and UK. For example, it reduces the permit review period for South Korean companies to export strategic goods to Japan from 15 days to 5 days, while simplifying the number of necessary documents from 5 to 3. The move comes 3 years after Seoul removed Japan from the whitelist in response to Tokyo's imposition of export restrictions on key materials for semiconductor chips amid a dispute over Japan's wartime forced labor issue. Seoul pledged to restore the whitelist status during a bilateral summit last month with Japan, expected to make reciprocal move soon. Amid a Seoul-Beijing diplomatic row over President Yoon-Suk-yeol's remarks on Taiwan, a South Korean envoy to China stressed that Seoul supports peace in the Taiwan Strait. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, South Korea's ambassador to China, Chung Jae-ho, told Beijing's Vice Foreign Minister Sun Wei-dong in a phone call that South Korea hopes for the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait and that it adheres to the One China policy. Beijing's foreign ministry belatedly revealed the details of Thursday's phone call, which it said was made to lodge a complaint over Yoon's recent interview with Reuters on South Korea's opposition to any attempts to change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait by force. During the phone call, the Vice FM said that Beijing's controversial remarks, which referred to Yoon's interview as meddling, was not directly aimed at the president. With fighting between rival factions in Sudan intensifying each day, foreign nationals in the country are being evacuated. Now, this includes South Koreans based in the northeastern African country, as the government began its evacuation procedure by sending an aircraft to the region. Lee Seung-jae with the latest.
Hundreds of foreign nationals living in war-torn Sudan are being evacuated by their countries. Many of the rescued have already arrived at a port in Saudi Arabia. The mass evacuation comes as the two rival factions fighting in the northeast African country have agreed to allow foreign nationals to be safely evacuated from Sudan.
Last night, the British military conducted an evacuation operation of British diplomatic staff and the dependents from Khartoum, using elements of 16 Air Assault Brigade, the Royal Air Force and the Royal Marines. Over 1,200 people contributed to this operation.
South Korea has also begun its evacuation process as an aircraft landed at a U.S. base in Djibouti on Saturday. As the airport in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum is currently closed, the 29 South Korean nationals in Sudan will be moved to the aircraft by the Cheonghae Unit, a South Korean naval task force operating in the region. Meanwhile, speaking during Sunday prayer in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis called for an immediate end to violence in Sudan.
Unfortunately, the situation in Sudan remains serious, so I renew my appeal for a quick end to the violence and a return to the path of dialogue. I invite everyone to pray for our Sudanese brothers and sisters.
The deadly clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces have been intensifying despite a 72-hour ceasefire declared for the Muslim holiday of Eid. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Lawyers representing Terraform Lab's co-founder Kwon have filed a request for courts to dismiss the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's lawsuit against the disgraced CEO. According to the court filing last Friday, the allegations of securities fraud by the SEC were unfounded, as the stablecoin at the heart of the issue is considered a currency and not a security. Kwon's lawyers also noted that the U.S. law prohibits regulators from using federal securities laws to assert jurisdiction over the digital assets in this case. They added that the SEC also failed to prove that Kwon had defrauded U.S. investors. The SEC in February filed a lawsuit against Kwon and its company Terraform Labs, accusing them of fraudulent activities. The South Korean government and the ruling People Power Party on Sunday announced relief measures to help the victims of real estate rental scams sweeping across South Korea. A temporary special law will give priority purchasing rights for affected properties, tax cuts, and loan support for the victims. The Korea Land and Housing Corporation can also use priority purchasing rights to turn affected properties into public housing for victims. Also beginning today, victims who receive loans from commercial banks to pay for housing can switch to lower interest loans.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Kenya, where 47 bodies, including those of children, were discovered over the weekend amid an investigation into a Christian cult. Now, the bodies were buried in shallow graves on private land owned by a pastor close to the coastal town of Malindi. The number of dead is expected to rise, as authorities say up to 58 graves have been found in the area. The grim recovery or discovery comes after authorities last week rescued 15 emaciated people from the Good News International Church. 4 of them died shortly after. The victims had reportedly been told by their pastor that they would be able to meet Jesus if they starved themselves. The pastor is in police custody and has been arrested already twice before on charges related to the deaths of children, but was released on bail both times. Now, the pastor has denied any wrongdoing and insists that he shut down his church in 2019. Moving over to the UK now, it was an ending that was fit for Hollywood at the racecourse ground on Saturday evening local time when Wrexham AFC came from behind to beat Boreham Wood 3-1 and secure promotion to the Football League. The promotion means that Wrexham will compete in a tougher League Two next season. It's the fourth tier of the English Football League and 3 promotions away from the English Premier League. The team had previously struggled in the 5th tier, spending 15 years in the National League. But Wrexham's fortunes have changed since being taken over by Hollywood actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney in 2021. Now, from New York and London to Peru, activists around the world rallied over the weekend to mark Earth Day. For 5 hours on Saturday, New York banned cars from 31 locations in the city. Meanwhile, in London, activists from the Extinction Rebellion group started a 4-day action on Friday called The Big One. It gathered people from all movements to protest climate action in front of the Houses of Parliament. Held every April 22nd, Earth Day aims to demonstrate support for environmental protection. The rallies come amid weeks of extreme weather, including heat waves in Thailand and India, and record low levels of snowfall for Europe. And finally, from Harry Potter wands to Star Wars costumes, a collection of over 100 years' worth of iconic Hollywood items went under the hammer over the weekend. Around 1,400 props were in the 2-day auction organized by Julian's Auctions in Beverly Hills. These included the hoverboard from Back to the Future, as well as items from the 1917 film Cleopatra. But the main feature of the auction was the iconic 3-piece white suit worn by actor John Travolta in the movie Saturday Night Fever. Now, this sold for $260,000 and is one of the only 2 known suits that were used in the movie's production.
Good morning. We are expecting some pleasant late spring weather on this last work week of April with much improved air quality. Normal to good air quality nationwide with some passing clouds in the south. Temperatures will be similar to yesterday in central regions, but eastern parts of the country will have highs that are cooler due to easterly winds. The air becoming dry again. West of central regions is under a dry weather advisory that's including here in Seoul. On top of that, wind is expected to be stronger, so please be careful with anything that could cause a spark. Meanwhile, Jeju and Jeollanam-do province could see some passing rain in the afternoon, but it will be less than 5 millimeters. Sunny skies in central regions with a high of 22 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Southern provinces will see highs in the mid to upper teens with lots of clouds, but again, decent air quality nationwide today. Then we have some rain in the forecast tomorrow. The farther south you are, the heavier the rain you will receive, and rain will also drag down the highs to the much cooler side tomorrow. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all we have for today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.